Metal music emerged in the late 1960s and early 70s as a musical extension of psychedelic or progressive rock. By 1969, the youth counterculture had become disillusioned with the hippie movement after it failed to effect the political change they had imagined. Psychedelic rock artists like King Crimson and Black Sabbath traded peace, love, and freedom for bitter irony and nihilism. According to Dina Weinstein,
the master word of the 1960s, love, was negated by its binary opposite, evil.
As Weinstein points out, this new post-hippie music did not argue against authority through liberating celebration, nonviolent protest, or thoughtful reflection. The rhetoric of metal is blasphemy, pastiche, and acceleration. It employs aggressive noise and disturbing, provocative lyrics and paratexts to hold a mirror to the evils of society on one hand, and on the other, to enact this mirror as a form of social empowerment. This is the rhetorical strategy I refer to as metal's aesthetics of evil. Metal is a sonically diverse genre constituted by a dense web of subgenres, which are themselves contingently defined first by a set of canonical artists, either founders or exemplars of the style, second by a loose set of musical characteristics, and finally by common paratextual elements, common themes in artwork, titles, lyrics, dress codes, and so on. Metal audiences who immerse themselves in the music and culture tend to be familiar with this oral tradition of genre classification, and they tend to be attuned to the nuanced stylistic differences between subgenres. The most fundamental generic distinction can be drawn between heavy metal and extreme metal. Heavy metal shares much in common with hard rock and the blues, and can be considered a point of development along the same trajectory. Extreme metal instead consists of a plurality of subgenres that reject blues influence, and instead develop towards an effective horizon of intensity that's separate from rock. This is what Hunt Hendricks calls the haptic void, a state characterized by embodied tension, aggression, catharsis, and a sense of incompleteness or hunger. Few popular audiences are so invested in the production and maintenance of genre discourse as audiences of metal music. Here, knowledge of subgenre taxonomies, histories, genealogies, and mythologies are an important marker of subcultural identity and clout within the vernacular community. The dense subgenre network that codes extreme metal can be understood as a counterbalance to the small significance placed on representational and emotional content in metal music. The sound of metal is characterized by the pursuit of extreme material effect, extreme volume, extreme speed or slowness, as well as instances that collapse the distinction between the two. Lyrics that forgo traditional meaning in favor of evoking a mood, which is often necessitated by the extreme vocal delivery that can obscure the words themselves. And finally, forms of dance that forgo patterned movement in favor of spontaneous expressions of violence in the mosh pits. These two contradictory impulses, on one hand, the rejection of representational meaning in favor of raw sonic materiality, on the other hand, obsessive genre coding according to historical and genealogical concerns. These produce a tension in metal music between universal form and local expression. By stripping away signification through the physical force of amplified sound in the mosh pits, race, gender, sexuality, class, and other identity markers are, at least superficially, discarded in metal's striving towards a universal affective body. At the same time, metal, and extreme metal in particular, tend to circulate within limited geographic or virtual spaces, where locality and identity become the infrastructure for navigating subcultural symbolic regimes, as well as channels through which experience is materialized. As a vernacular discourse, then, metal allows marginalized groups to construct identities that both transcend their immediate situation, but that are rooted and invested in geographical place and localized culture. A good amount of extreme metal, especially up-tempo subgenres like speed or thrash metal, grindcore, and black metal, all emerged from the ideological and musical exchange between hardcore punk and heavy metal, two distinct genre traditions with overlap in form and function. Aside from the shared musical drive towards extremeness in a rock band format, the two movements shared similar counter-hegemonic attitudes and confrontational lyrics and imagery, including an interest in the icons of evil. Nazi imagery in particular has been a popular target for appropriation, serving as the ultimate symbol of evil for metal bands and as an instantly provocative fashion accessory for punk artists. In addition, like many strains of extreme metal, punk rock has self-consciously attempted to purge the influence of the blues in order to arrive at some pure clinical essence of rock music. For many, in punk especially, this move away from the appropriation of black artists was motivated by a sense of disconnection from the black experience and guilt over the industry's treatment of black artists. However, these two efforts, on one hand to create an original, non-appropriative, essentially white genre of popular music, on the other to contest social norms through controversial iconography, came together to facilitate channels for the legitimate expression of white supremacy. The sound and style of contemporary second-wave black metal was codified by a group of musicians based in Oslo, Norway, during roughly 1990 to 92, which included members of bands such as Mayhem, Burzum, Dark Throne, and Emperor. In their pursuit of the haptic void, these artists incorporated heavily distorted, tremolo-picked chainsaw guitars, rapid double-kick drumming in general, and blast beats in particular, and vocal techniques that represent the human voice at its limits, screaming, shrieking, whispering, growling. The result approaches white noise, a disorienting and sublime wall of sound that is both pure intensity and undifferentiated void. Discussing the function of loudness in rock and metal, Michael C. Heller describes how, although sound is a process of vibration in a physical medium, it is phenomenologically exterior to the body. Even before being subjected to conscious interpretation, sounds are decoded for distance and location, and so appear to be the effect of an outside agent, a sound object. At high volumes, however, pressure waves in the air are felt tactilely in the body, interrupting distinctions between interior and exterior. Intense sound further generates contradictions between auditory, tactile, proprioceptive, and visual sense perceptions that compel the listener to orient themselves in their environments. This sonic defamiliarization heightens the significance of alternative cues like language and visuals, and lends these things additional rhetorical force, such as in the bursting forth of religious expression in the culturally mediated experience of worship music. First-wave black metal was a musically diverse group of artists, including Venom, Bathory, and Merciful Fate, who are all grouped together in retrospect for their use of satanic imagery. Inspired by these artists, Norwegian black metal engaged in the aesthetics of evil by adopting extremist religious and political views as a rejection of hegemonic social norms and as a signal of dedication to their extreme music. Prominent artists associated with the scene engaged in serial church burnings, murders, and hate crimes. Most notoriously, Varg Vikernes, who recorded under the name Burzum, endorsed a combination of paganism and esoteric Nazism. In 1994, Vikernes was convicted of church arson and the murder of Mayhem guitarist Euronymous. The Norwegian black metal scene has since been heavily studied and mythologized within metal communities, where it's often regarded with profound ambivalence for its contiguity of aesthetic innovation and moral reprehensibility. Manuel Gagnon is a Swiss-American musician, born to a black American mother and a white Swiss father. As a songwriting exercise for his chamber pop project, Bird Mask, he had been asking 4chan users for arbitrary genres to combine into a song. In 2013, it was one of these threads that gave him the idea to combine black metal and...
Hello?
Hey, Michael?
Hello, Connor.
Yeah, so I'm doing that audio essay on Zeal Ardor, and I'm in a bit of a predicament. Like, it's not my place to censor the experiences of a black man, but I'm not going to read the 4chan comments.
Oh yeah. One day, someone said nigger music, quote unquote, and another said black metal, quote unquote.
Thank you for saving me.
You're welcome. This is the only time I'm going to save you, dude.
So, undeterred by the casual racism that thrives in anonymity, Gagnon was intrigued by the theoretical connections that might be drawn between the extreme genre of black metal and various modes of black musical expression. He began producing music under the project Zeal Ardor, an avant-garde metal band whose style juxtaposes black metal with African American spirituals, work songs, blues, jazz, and other black music from the American South. This genre clash plays out musically in different ways across the band's 4 full-length albums, and combines with lyrics and paratextual elements to construct a speculative sonic history, where enslaved black people rejected Christianity and instead worshipped Satan. Building an argument based on the semiotic play between the genre codes of blues/spirituals and extreme metal, Zeal Ardor rewrites racial histories in order to highlight parallels and divergences between the experiences of black Americans throughout history and the countercultural values and aesthetics of extreme metal. These musical and mythological arguments work rhetorically to subvert racist narratives in black metal, to open space for black expressions of cathartic evil in a predominantly white subculture, and to provoke reflection on historical and contemporary political violence and forms of resistance. Zeal Ardor's debut album, Devil Is Fine, was released independently in 2016, then re-released on MVKA Records in March 2017. The album was self-produced using lo-fi recording methods to emulate both the gritty DIY sound of second-wave black metal and the primitive wax cylinder recordings that musicologists like John Lomax used to capture black folk songs in segregated prisons in the 1930s. This incorporation of gospel, blues, jazz, and other folk music from black traditions holds a mirror to folk metal, Viking metal, and similar efforts by white European artists to assert their ethnic identity using the format of extreme metal. The 2018 album Stranger Fruit further refines the production and style and continues the alternate history narrative. Now, satanic spirituals and work songs are largely replaced by similarly subversive slave escape songs, like the ones sung by Mose Platt in the Lomax prison recordings. Zeal Ardor's 2022 self-titled album represents their most comprehensive musical statements, updating the alternate history narrative to the 20th and 21st centuries. The album artwork depicts 2 sculpted black hands against a flat white background, illuminated but casting no shadow against the digital void. Each hand holds out 2 fingers. The right hand, on the viewer's left, is pointed up, and the left hand is pointed down in imitation of Baphomet, the occult icon of duality and balance. Zeal Ardor is printed at the top of the image and again upside down at the bottom. The title track, Zeal Ardor, opens the album with a heavy, reverberating synth that drones like a foghorn. The beat drops into a cinematic industrial instrumental before vocalist Manuel Gagnon enters. His voice is low and heavy, tinged with a drawl and supported with overdubbed harmony and call-and-response vocals. This style of antiphony made its way into African-American folk music from the African oratory traditions. This type of polyvocality has become culturally associated with the sacred communal tradition of the spiritual. But despite evoking religious music, the foreboding and hostile lyrics instead hint at occult rituals and an unspecified revolution. The song sets up the album's fundamental dualities, spiritual and blasphemous, aggressive and melodic, nihilistic and empowering, industrial and soulful. The second track and the album's lead single, Run, is driven by frantic tom grooves and claustrophobic production and arrangements. The first 6 seconds consist of guttural whispers that are distorted, stereo-panned, and digitally glitched out in a bastardization of folk polyvocality, briefly interrupted by a calm and determined command to run. Along with the opening track, Run establishes the character, attitude, and vocal style of the album's narrator, as Gagnon alternately delivers portentous warnings, possibly threats, in a husky blues inflection, and screams profane anti-theist proclamations in a black metal shriek. These warnings and the commands to run construct 2 separate and opposed audiences. To the singer's allies and potential allies, be they runaway slaves or satanic terrorists, The lyrics serve as an alarm or rallying call. To their would-be captors and oppressors, the lyrics serve as a threat of violence. The listener is therefore encouraged to identify with the narrator both as part of a subversive community and in opposition to a dominant but vulnerable ruling class. The blues ballad Golden Lyre further develops the character of the album's narrator. Gagnon employs a series of negative enthymemes to paint himself as a depraved pariah, opening with the spoken lines, "If luck follows the wicked, I'm a lucky man. If hope is for the true, then I'm hopeless, my friend." Following this pattern throughout the verse, the narrator positions himself in opposition to hegemonic constructs of truth and wickedness, honesty and love, bravery and freedom. Like much of the album, the vocals here are clip distorted, as if they were recorded on old or low-quality audio equipment, another sonic marker shared by both early recordings of blues musicians and the low-fidelity DIY recordings of Norwegian black metal. The percussive banging of chains is introduced partway through to evoke a singing chain gang. This sound of chains, like the sound of a cheap speaker and second-hand recording gear, act as signs of the material limitations of one's environment. Appropriating these sonic signifiers of destitution into music involves a reevaluation of aesthetic discourse, asserting the creative potential and artistic value of one's literal or figurative chains. The music video to the song Run follows the captive subject of an invasive medical procedure as he experiences terrifying psychedelic visions of an eldritch being while fellow patients dance in ritual. The video calls to mind horror stories from the CIA's MKUltra experiments, adding a twist to the album's alternative history narrative and demonstrating the band's reimagining of socio-political violence and state power through occult themes. While the band's first two albums employed a lo-fi sound and close imitation of gospel and blues forms to craft an alternative sonic history, Zeal Ardor's self-titled album makes use of more contemporary production influences. This serves to expand the story to an alternate present and a speculative future while exploiting the innovations and affordances of contemporary popular music to move the body and the emotions in uniquely powerful ways. In Zeal and Ardor's sonic past, slaves in the antebellum South rejected the God of their masters and developed a tradition of musical resistance. Satanic spirituals, work songs, and slave escape songs, augmented with black metal blast beats, tremolo-picked guitars, and eerie shrieks. On the self-titled album, lo-fi blues and spirituals are anachronistically combined with sleek industrial metal and hip-hop influences. Lyrics and visuals suggest a modern or near-future setting where class and racial tensions manifest as religious conflict between the American Christian hegemony and militant Satanists, the ideological or genetic descendants of enslaved black people. The album's third single, Bow, is the most vivid depiction of the near-present setting of the album. Synth bass, hand-clap snare, and backing vocalizations work together to produce a trans-historical soundscape, while lyrics describe omens of a modern apocalypse at the end of American imperialism. Greek god on the back of a stallion coming up on a 3-lane highway. Prepare for the death of a billion. Wake up at the end of my day. By extending their alternative history to the present, Zeal and Ardor not only imagines a lineage of black expressions of evil, but expands this narrative to confront modern threats of class warfare, psychological torture, and societal collapse that invite the audience to reflect on contemporary political violence and forms of resistance. The irregular rhythms and overtly digital production on this album reflect another coupling between practices of sonic emancipation on two sides of the Atlantic, hip-hop and industrial music. The two genres emerged in the mid to late 1970s in the Bronx and London, respectively, as subcultural movements to hijack pop music through DIY practices, the misuse and abuse of hegemonic techniques, and specifically the use of synthesizers and audio samples to remix the past and create new futures. The album's industrial and hip-hop rhythms draw on the same principle of sonic defamiliarization as extreme metal to radically different effects. The undifferentiated blast beats and chainsaw guitars of black metal work to collapse the boundary between speed and slowness, between loudness and ambience. In contrast, the staggering rhythms and tactical silence of songs like Feed the Machine or Gotterdammerung produce sonic vacuums that highlight the dynamic range and rhythmic intensity, and that compel the body to move through calculated bursts of sound. Amidst these defamiliarizing effects, the lyrics, visuals, and sonic cues all paint a narrative the listener can latch onto for orientation and meaning, channeling the primal aggression of the haptic void into emotion and action related to social justice. The album's final single is called Church Burns. It opens with isolated, subtly clip-distorted call-and-response vocals before introducing chain gang percussion, clean guitars, and melodic piano. The catchy pop blues vocals ramp up in pace and intensity through the pre-chorus, until the beat drops with the introduction of distorted guitars and heavy drums in the chorus. The lyrics describe a church burning and other crimes of murder and arson committed by a black fugitive. The narrator's actions mirror similar crimes committed by anti-theistic white supremacists in the Norwegian black metal scene. The soft bridge leads into the final chorus with a line, "Whatever be the cost, got the feeling that I must bring that flame to the cross." The final line is repeated as a whisper, like a voice in the narrator's head. It's impossible to separate this imagery from the cross burnings practiced as an intimidation tactic by the Ku Klux Klan. These acts of terrorism, church arson and cross burning, are here divorced from their white supremacist connotations within Zeal and Ardor's sonic fiction. Once again, they take on their original meanings as signs for anti-authoritarian rage and declarations of war. In stark contrast to Church Burns, the following track, Gotterdammerung, is a mid-tempo extreme metal song. The title alludes to the final work in Wagner's Ring Cycle. The lyrics, predominantly screamed in Gagno's native language of German, describe a metaphorical twilight of the gods, commanding the listener to reject the oppressive old gods, that is, the god of Christianity, in favor of a fallen black god. The use of the German language and references to Wagner's Ring Cycle operate as allusions on two related levels. First, to the Norwegian black metal scene and artists like Burzum who romanticized the German language and Norse mythology. And second, to the widespread cultural associations between German and Nazism, as well as Nazi appropriations of Wagner's music. In the context of Zeal and Ardor's militant black Satanism, however, these signs are contested and subverted. The materiality and the harsh grain of the German language, like the provocative act of church burning, is then purified of its associations with racism and repurposed into a general signifier of aggression and violent resistance. In exploiting these connotations, Zeal and Ardor uses the genre codes of extreme metal to acknowledge histories of racism while creating new spaces for emancipatory expression in metal. Have any thoughts on this?
As a black man, I really like Zeal and Ardor, because of his double entendres, especially in Guterdam. Hopefully pronounced that correctly.
Gotterdammerung.
Exactly. The double entendre for Niger in Latin is brilliant. And I think that he has a brilliant mind. And I think it's fabulous that he mixes, quote unquote, black music with black metal, because it goes surprisingly well together. And if you were to listen to any of Zeal and Ardor, you would know exactly what I'm saying. And last thought is there's not enough black people in black metal or metal in general. So the fact that he took this joke from Reddit and he just made it into his own category and his own sound for his band is very funny and is petty, and I am in love with it. It's so black. That's it.